welcome to the Writers Center. Greetings and welcome. My name is Zach Powers. I'm the director of the Writers Center. I'll be back up here, and you'll see me throughout the evening, but to get started, I'd like to welcome up one of our board members, Rachel Kuntz, to introduce you to what we are here at the Writers Center. Rachel.
This thing makes really great noises. I just want to welcome everybody to the Writers Center on behalf of the entire board and staff. It's such an honor to be here with you in this room. The Writers Center is a literary arts nonprofit that supports writers and everyone who wants to write. And we're just so happy to have you here. Many writers have gotten their start here. Every year we offer hundreds of creative writing classes and free events for writers. We're also home of Poet Lore, America's oldest poetry journal, now in its 136th year of continuous publication, still publishing some of the most exciting contemporary poets from around the world today. We also print the Writers Center magazine, which is a free publication. It's got all of our class events and event schedule, as well as some exciting articles about the writing life. We give that out for free, so you can take one on your way out of the event. Finally, now that you're here, we hope that you'll come back. Come for a craft chat, come for a workshop, a free event, free reading, or just to reconnect with the writing community. We're always here, and you are always welcome.
Thank you, Rachel. And I should say that Rachel's here representing the Writers Center tonight, but Rachel is also the director of the Inner Loop, which is one of the DC area's most amazing literary nonprofits. Someone's giving jazz hands for the Inner Loop, so everyone let's give jazz hands for the Inner Loop. Check them out. It's an amazing, they have programming throughout the year. They have a reading 10 times a year, and then retreats and other writing programs. So if you are of the writing inclination, please check them out as well. Up next, I'd like to introduce Gary Berg-Cross. Gary is, I don't know where Gary, oh, there he is, over here, right next to where I was just looking. I'm very observant. Gary is from the F. Fitzgerald Festival and wants to say a few words before the wonderful festival tomorrow.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel, and of course the Writers Center, one of our wonderful partners. And the way I think about it, we have an annual festival, and this is our main weekend, and the Writers Center Readings kicks off the festival weekend. And some people may have seen this, which has information more about tomorrow's event, which hopefully many of you have registered for. We're basically at our capacity limits at Montgomery College, and it will feature Percival Everett and Madison Smartt Bell, who you hear later today, as well as a keynote talk by Maureen Corrigan, who will speak a little bit on the fact that this is the 100th anniversary of the publication of Gatsby. So we're sort of celebrating that centennial as part of the festival. I do want to mention that we are funded by grants annually, and we'd like to get feedback from people who attend events like this and the tomorrow's event. And so you will probably be getting an email from us with a link to an evaluation form so that you can tell us what you liked about today's event. And of course, if you go to tomorrow's event, there'll be details on evaluating on that. And I hope, essentially, that we can continue these festivals going forward, and look forward to seeing people at the event tomorrow and our event next year.
I mentioned as we were, before the event started, that we do have books for sale next door. I do want to reiterate that. A great way to support writers is to buy books from those writers. A great way to support publishing and the whole ecosystem of writers and publishing and all that. So please check out our bookseller is People's Book, an amazing independent bookstore in Tacoma Park. They are out here helping us out. So please support them, support the festival, support our authors by getting a copy of the book. If you are interested, the books in the plural, because you may be familiar with some of our authors, but hopefully we'll be introducing you to maybe one or two new authors you aren't aware of this evening. Yeah, I think that's about it, Gary. I just want to thank you again. I want to thank everyone from the F. Scott Fitzgerald. Jackson, I know, has helped with our authors over the years. Yeah, it's been a great partnership, and I'm so honored that it continues to bring events here. And I should say, too, I get to sneak in tomorrow and teach a high school workshop at the festival itself. So if you're around tomorrow, please come say hi. I may not get a chance to talk tonight, but I'm always happy to talk to you if you have a minute. All right, it's time for some readings. I want to call up our first reader is going to be Samuel Ashworth. Samuel Ashworth is a professor. I don't know why I said Samuel like that. Samuel Ashworth. I think it's because I've only ever called you Sam, and like trying to say it was Samuel. Okay, I'm done. Sam Ashworth is a professor of creative writing at George Washington University and the author of the novel The Death and Life of August Sweeney. It's an amazing novel. I got a chance to read it early and provide a blurb for it, which I was honored to do. His fiction and nonfiction have appeared in The Atlantic, The Washington Post, Long Reads, Eater, and many others. A native New Yorker, he now lives with his wife and 2 sons in Washington, D.C. Sam, please come forward.
God, this is cool for me. This is cool for me. I hope you all enjoy it, but I'm having a great time. This is a big night for me. This is the book, The Death and Life of August Sweeney. It came out this past year. It tells the rise and fall of a celebrity chef through his autopsy at the hands of the doctor he mysteriously handpicked for the job. So I am neither a chef nor a doctor, which meant I had to go learn how to do both of those things. So I spent some time working at a Michelin-star kitchen. I spent 2 weeks, let's say, assisting with autopsies in a Pittsburgh hospital. The rule was Sam doesn't get to touch the sharp objects, which was firmly for my protection, not anybody else's. So it is the story of this chef, and you must imagine the largest man you've ever seen, and then make him bigger. It chronicles 50 years of his life. And when we meet him here, in this section I'm going to read, he is sort of begun to settle into something like domesticity. It's the mid-90s, and he's got a little show on this fledgling cable network called the Television Food Network, which at this point is only available in the tri-state area. No one really watches it, but he has, let's see, and he's living with a woman named Jane, and her name is Jane Goodall. And when I wrote that, I thought, this is very stupid, and then I could not part with her. And now that Jane Goodall has left us, I'm very pleased that there is a character in this book. But anyway, one night in 1996, at 2:04 a.m., August Sweeney burst from the bedsheets like a giant whale breaching the surface of the ocean in pain, so sudden, so total, that he couldn't draw breath to scream. All he could do was thrash and wheeze in agony. Jerked awake, Jane's first thought was that somehow August was being electrocuted. Help, he gasped. Help. What is it? What's wrong? I don't know. I think something exploded. Ice. I get ice? Oh shit, Jesus. She ran to get an ice pack and came back, and he pointed to his right lower back. August's eyes were shut so tight he could see little starbursts, like it was Fantasia, and they were trying to animate his pain with little dancing flares of color and music, and the ice wasn't remotely helping. Somehow the pain was getting worse. The pain was deep in the middle of his body, where ice wouldn't reach. He didn't know you could feel this much pain. He figured that at some point there was just a maximum pain you could feel, but this just kept going. Wasn't he supposed to go into shock? He was in shock. Jane was hovering over him, her face white with fear, asking him what to do. Call 911, whispered August, curling into a fetal ball. Now! Jane sprinted to the phone. Through his haze of pain, August saw Jane whirling into action while they waited for the ambulance. She was packing a bag, throwing in wallets and IDs and clothes and food and a few magazines, anything that looked like it might be remotely useful. God, she was good in a crisis. Where's your insurance card? What insurance card? Oh my God, don't tell me. You don't have insurance? No, who the fuck can afford it? You can't. The network has an HMO. Can we talk about this? He grunted. After I have pants on. Jesus, she said, startled. You're naked. She grabbed a pair of boxers and sweatpants and somehow muscled him into them with the force of a mother lifting a car off her baby. He'd never seen her so scared, but then again, he'd never been so scared either. He couldn't begin to imagine what could possibly cause this kind of pain, but it had to be serious. Like an internal organ had burst, an important one, and for all he knew, toxic shit was leaking into his body. Through the fog of pain, he tried to remember what part of a human body was back in all the right. He could summon up in his mind the carcass of a pig or a cow, but he couldn't begin to think of what was inside him. The EMTs were there in 5 minutes, a man and a woman. Buddy, said the woman, what you got there is a kidney stone. I've had him, said the other. I tell you, I'd rather have a tooth pulled out. At least it's over fast. In the corner of the bedroom, Jane hugged herself and chewed a hangnail. Can you sit up? Said the woman as she put a blood pressure cuff on him. August tried and the room took off. But he held on. And finally they got him into a big metal wheelchair which bumped over the ridge of the door jamb, and it was like someone had ripped a dozen stitches out of August's back. Sorry, big guy, said the woman, can't lift you. You happy you don't live in that 5th floor walk-up anymore? Said Jane in the elevator. The woman snorted. Ha! We would have had to get you out with a crane, buddy. I love you, baby, August said, shutting his eyes to try to keep the elevator from revolving, but also surprising himself by how ardently he meant it. They had been saying, I love you, for some time now, and it wasn't like he hadn't meant it. But not until now did he understand just how much he meant it. What would he do without her? Collapse? Be flown out a window trussed to a crane? The intensity of his love began competing with the intensity of his pain, and the two crashed into one another like vast atmospheric pressure systems and whipped up a hurricane inside his heart, and he did not know what to do, and his vision went bubbly and bleary, and he realized these were tears. Jane held his hand in the ambulance. He seemed so small and tender to her then, like a bear cub. If the alien from Alien bursts out of my stomach, you gotta promise to kill it, okay? He grunted to the woman EMT as she took his vitals. It's gonna lay its eggs all over the ship. He was trying to force jokes through the pain, and she saw he wasn't doing it for the EMT's benefit, but for hers. He didn't want her to be scared. And this was what love was, Jane thought. When you're suffering, but all you care about is making sure that the other person is okay. She felt at that moment that she would have jumped in front of the subway for him. And maybe he would have done the same for her. The NYU ER at 3 a.m. was like the most dismal casino in the world. No windows, machines everywhere, pinging and blinking, and he lay on the stretcher, which barely accommodated him, and hissed in breath through the pain as the stone scraped its way down his ureter with all the delicacy of claws on a blackboard. Jane gave the duty nurse his information. No, he didn't have insurance. Yes to the drinking question. Yes to the smoking question. Yes, he used substances, marijuana, cocaine, not that often. And all around them was the sullen chaos of a New York City ER at 3 a.m. And Jane was in full producer mode, wrathful, commanding, magnificent. She would not permit them to just leave him in triage. A room would be found, and a doctor would be summoned. The nurses seemed to marvel at her authority. An exam room was found for August. He was still writhing as they wheeled him in. The RN walked into the room and froze. Then she smiled, delighted. It is you! She clapped her hands. I love your show! Oxtail! I didn't even know white people had heard of Smart's tale. August had no idea where she was from. Africa, the Caribbean, he couldn't tell. But if she knew who he was, maybe she would get him the good drugs. He very much wanted drugs now. She made him describe his pain all over again, which now he could do with some fluency, even through gritted teeth. Anything to expedite this. His mind honed in on the drugs as a singular goal. He knew enough about scoring painkillers to know that asking for painkillers specifically by name was the best way to make sure you did not get any painkillers. So he told her the pain was an 11 out of 10 and held Jane's hand tightly and pathetically. And in short order, she came back with a doctor who ordered him an entire bag of morphine, all for himself. And by 4 a.m., August was purring in the warm embrace of the woman he loved. He said he was hungry, and she produced from her tote bag a sleeve of Ritz crackers with cheese and a Tupperware pasta salad. What a hero she was. What a woman. In the middle of the night, while he was being a whimpering baby, she pulled herself together, got the paramedics there, packed a bag, bullied the whole damn hospital into doing what she wanted, and all of this while wearing a pink hoodie over his oversized Pantera t-shirt. He was just a shitty cook who'd abandoned people all his life. He knew it. Don't think he didn't know it. And here, floating over him, cradling his head and stroking his thinning hair, was a goddamned angel. August was almost grateful to the kidney stone, for it had shown him true love. He knew what he wanted now with a clarity he'd never felt before. But the kidney stone was stuck fast in the ureter. And so they took him away to a room where they aimed a machine like a humongous overhead projector at his stomach and bombarded him with ultrasound for an hour to break up the stone into crystals. And a day later, smoked on Percocet, he keened in pain on the toilet as the crystals shredded their way out of his urethra, and she knelt next to him and held his hand, and he looked up at her, his eyes welling with tears, and asked her in a small, trembling voice if she would marry him. Tell me this isn't about health insurance. But there were tears in her eyes. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. Our next reader, Creaky Mike's done, Afabwaje Kurian. Afabwaje is the author of the novel Before the Mango Ripens, which has been shortlisted for the 2025 Aspen Words Literary Prize. I should also mention that tonight is the Hurston Wright Legacy Awards, and we have stolen 2 of our readers from the Hurston Wright Legacy Awards, which are like across town, and they're our friends, and we're so sorry, but we asked first. So also a finalist for the debut novel, is that correct? Yes, the debut novel, so congratulations, good luck. She received her MFA from the Iowa Writers Workshop. Her short fiction has been published in McSweeney's Quarterly Concern, Callaloo, Swamp Pink, The Bear Life Review, and Joyland Magazine. She's taught creative writing at the University of Iowa, for the International Writing Program, and for a little place called the Writers Center. Please take the stage.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's better. So, I'm really sad that I have to follow. It was like having an actor appear on stage. So, I'm not going to off the cuff, so I'm just going to read the little speech that I prepared. But I'm really excited to be here tonight to give a well-deserved tribute to Percival Everett. I had the privilege of meeting Percival in New York in April, when we were both finalists for the Aspen Words Literary Prize. So we both lost. But I'm really excited because now my claim to fame is that I lost with Percival. So I've been telling everyone that. So first of all, I have to say this. You are my husband's favorite author. And you're sitting next to him. You have made his night. He claims that I'm his favorite author, but I do not believe that. And he said he's incredibly jealous of me right now. So I have chosen to read from my debut novel, Before the Mango Ripens, which came out last year in September. The novel takes place in the 1970s, and it's about a town in Nigeria that's wrestling with the presence of white American missionaries. So the scene I was going to read in honor of Percival is when Jim Clemens, the missionary reverend, goes to see the town's traditional healer, divine, and he takes his acolyte, Zanya, who's one of the Nigerian locals, with him. And the traditional healer in my novel reminds me of Mama Z in Percival Everett's novel, The Trees. So Mama Z holds the town of Money, Mississippi to account in her own way with the files that she's collected of all of the lynchings that have happened, not only in Money, Mississippi, but also across the US. And in the same way, she's a central figure in The Trees, and she possesses wisdom and knowledge beyond others. And this is very similar to the traditional healer in the town of Rabata in my novel. But as I went over the scene, I just thought this doesn't read that well out loud, so I decided to read something completely different. So the connection here is that the character's named Jim, and in The Trees, the main character is also named Jim. So I think that there is, however, a spirit of the trees even in what I'm going to read. So in what I'm reading, Reverend Jim visits a village called Yawari, and he visits it with his housekeeper or house servant, Manasseh, and he's visiting it to see Zanya's father, hoping to confirm if a story that Zanya told the town about a miracle of fire is true. A man Jim presumed was Zanya's father, Baba Pema, stood under the lintel as if he had been disturbed while sleeping and had come out to discover the reason. Baba Pema was not as tall as Zanya. In fact, he was shorter than Jim. Zanya's height must have come from his mother's side. Baba Pema gestured Jim to two chairs on the side of the house close to a forested area. The chairs faced the house and were so close to the shrubs and plants that branches dug into Jim's neck when he sat. Jim thought he saw Baba Pema exchange secretive glances with a man who had shown them the house before the man walked off. There was no offer of food or drink, so Jim started. Baba Pema, I know your son, Zanya. Baba Pema did not respond, and at first Jim thought he might not understand English. Ohobi, Manasseh translated in Baidi. I have ears to hear, Baba Pema said in English. I have heard him. Zanya works with me for the Christian, Jim caught himself. Surely Christian had been the wrong word to mention in a place like this. Zanya's father showed no change in countenance. The mission in Rabata, Jim finished. You are the ones who turned Zanya away from us, Baba Pema said, away from his people and away from his gods. Jim laughed nervously. Depends on how you look at it, I suppose. He wanted to add that people in Rabata knew his and Manasseh's whereabouts, except nobody in Rabata knew where he was. Gary thought he had gone on visitation nearby, a 10-minute drive, and not an hour. Jim had sworn Manasseh to secrecy, but he had had the presence of mind to alert Mission Radio about their trip to Yawari. Zanya has built many places in Rabata for the mission, Jim said. He told me he learned these skills from you. Yes, Baba Pema said. I'd love to hear a little about this if you don't mind, Jim said. Admiration might draw Baba Pema out of his laconic responses. It seemed the right currency regardless of culture. You see this house, Baba Pema said. It is one that me and Zanya built. You see how strong it is? It's a wonderful home you have, Jim said. This was the case with all the houses he and Zanya had built, Baba Pema said. There were houses in the village where the construction was an inferior quality than the buildings he and Zanya had worked on. He had taught Zanya to build before Zanya had even entered primary school. He had only daughters at first, and it saddened him until Zanya came along. Baba Pema had taught Zanya at a young age how to put the clay mixture into the wooden molds. He had let him stomp in small pits with the rest of the grown men. Baba Pema pressed his nostrils together with his fingers and looked out at the house again. But Zanya had gone off to his studies at Kunama Secondary School and returned, turning his nose at the labor that had fed him. Baba Pema seemed to speak about Zanya with a flush of contradictory emotions, pride and what seemed to Jim like bitterness. And were you not pleased with Zanya after his studies, Jim said. Baba Pema looked at Jim. It seems your relationship with him is not as strong as the boy left our village. He left his family. What else is there? Well, I'm sure his new religious beliefs have caused some tensions. Is that why the people of Iwari attempted to set him on fire? Set him on fire, Baba Pema said. It's the news that's been circulating. Twigs snapped and branches and leaves rustled. Jim looked out into the thicket and turned his head to look down the path they had walked on to Baba Pema's. Manasseh had heard the sound also, and he looked from side to side, a frown developing on his face. Yes, Baba Pema said, I've heard these stories. So did it or didn't it happen, Jim said? Did you light the guinea corn chaff around your son's feet? Did your family try to burn your son? Baba Pema chuckled to himself and he looked at Jim. Why did you come to our village? You don't trust Zanya? This time, Jim heard footsteps, loud and clear. And he turned his head in the direction of the noise. He thought he saw a group of men in the dwindling sunlight, walking through the forest behind the house, heading in their direction. They could be farmers, taking a shortcut back to their homes, or they could be women. It was kind of hard to see with his eyesight from this distance. Women returning from the riverbank, buckets of water on their shoulders, giving the illusion of tall, strapping men. But there was something savage in how the figures approached. I'd hate to say that I don't trust Zanya, Jim said, finding that he was stuttering. He's done a lot for the mission. Okay, why did you come to Yawari? Well, we're here to verify the testimony Zanya gave about the fire, that an angel blew out the flames before he could burn. You want to know what we did to him? Baba Pema said. Jim's heart raced, but he pressed on. Zanya said his uncles came together, and I just thought it sounded terrible. Your brothers or your wife's brothers, I presume, would have been the ones who did this, who tried to set your son on fire? Baba Pema's leer was ugly and twisted. You want to know what we did to that boy? Branches cracked and tree limbs fell as men emerged from the forest behind the house. One by one, they greeted Baba Pema and formed a crude semicircle in front of Jim and Manasseh. Reverend, this is not good, Manasseh said. What's happening, Jim said, rising slowly. Zanya's father rose, and with a quick, authoritative flick of his head like a military general, he directed one of the men to stand behind Jim. Reverend, Manasseh shouted. One man grabbed Manasseh's shoulders in a crushing hold, pulling him back. You want to know what we did to Zanya? Baba Pema repeated. No, Jim said weakly. Please, we don't want to know, Manasseh cried. We don't want to know. The man closest to Jim twisted a piece of cloth in his hands. Was that a blindfold or a gag? Jim's breathing had become asthmatic. He stepped back and he collided into a large brawny frame. Baba Pema smiled and said, we will do to you what we did to Zanya. And Jim cried as he was pushed off his feet and lifted overhead. He was rigid and cold as a corpse as the two men carried him down the village path. Dampness soaked his armpits and spread through the shirt and suit he had worn. The blindfold smelled of kerosene. It burned his eyes and his nose was inflamed and he could not release a finger to scratch, to pull the blindfold away. This was how it would end for him. They were not going to make it out of the village alive. Jim had known death was a possibility. He had read about the Boxer Rebellion in China. Hundreds of missionaries slaughtered. He had flirted with death when he first came to Nigeria, and he had walked away unharmed. The robbery had been an inauspicious turn of events, but this he had walked into. Jim felt the man's calluses cutting against his ankles. His thoughts turned to how his sons would react to the news of his death. Walter, stoic and proud, taking the news as if he had expected it to happen. Pete, would it lead Pete to repentance? Would it lead either of his sons to regret their strained relationship with their father? Please, Jim heard Manasseh implore, we're begging you, please leave us. Jim ought to speak too and plead for his life, but the fear of what was ahead had tied his tongue. It was all he could do to keep breathing. The smell of the kerosene and the fear of the horror that awaited them choked him. The men must be carrying them into the center of the village. They were not talking amongst themselves. It was as if they had done this before, and they were coordinated in walking on which route to take and how to do this with stealth. They had done this to other missionaries, to their own people, like Zanya, who rejected their village gods. Sheaves would be tossed to the ground, the villagers would gather, a match would be struck, and the flames would writhe around Jim and Manasseh, for there had been a crowd when Zanya was almost burned. Jim heard the ferocious rush of water, smelled the change in the air, the mustiness of the river, algae and roots and soil. The men must have carried them down to the riverbank, and it was the same river he and Manasseh had passed driving into the village. They would be thrown into the torrent. He had never been much of a swimmer. He'd be caught into the current, and he would not survive. "Throw them," Zanya's father said. "No," Jim shouted, and the words shut out, and the men tightened their grip on him. "Please, please," Jim begged. "You wanted to know," Baba Pima said. No, we made mistakes. We should have never come." "Yes," Baba Pima said. "You should never have come." Jim felt the swing of his body, the heave-ho. He was like nothing in their hands. He was a sack of leaves as they swung him back and forth, and he waited for the feeling of flying into the air, for the sharp descent, for the explosion of water in his nostrils and his mouth. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Up next, we have Madison Smartt Bell. Madison Smartt Bell is the author of 12 novels. Soldier's Joy received the Lillian Smith Award, and All Souls Rising was a finalist for the National Book Award and the Penn Faulkner Award, and won the 1996 Ensfield Wolf Award for Best Book of the Year dealing with matters of race. He has also published 2 collections of short stories, as well as biographies of Toussaint Louverture and Robert Stone. His most recent work is the novel The Rich of Matanya. Born and raised in Tennessee, he has lived in New York, Haiti, Paris, and London, and now lives in Baltimore, Maryland. A graduate of Princeton University and Hollins College, he has taught in various creative writing programs, including the Iowa Writers Workshop and the Johns Hopkins University Writing Seminars. He taught creative writing at Goucher College from 1984 to 2023, along with his wife, poet Elizabeth Spires. Madison, please take the stage.
That's Batongue. Batongue is the African quarter in Brussels, just for your future reference. Those are 2 very hard-asked poems, but fortunately I misunderstood. I thought I was supposed to read Percival Everett's work as a tribute to him, so that's what I'm going to do, having brought nothing of my own. And there's such a wealth of Percival's work. It's a bit of a puzzle choosing what to read for this occasion. I've read lots of his books, and I own a few I haven't read yet, but I don't even own all of them. So I thought I'd play a simplicity card and go for Cutting Lisa, Percival's 3rd novel, but the first that I read, thanks to our mutual editor, Court Smith. Right, I mean, you don't really have to eat the microphone in this small of a venue. Can you hear me in the back? Our mutual editor, Court Smith, crossed up the envelopes when he sent out first copies of our new novels to each of us. Percival would have received my 3rd novel, curiously entitled Straight Cut, unless the mix-up involved more than two books. Back in 1986, I read Cutting Lisa in a sitting and was deeply impressed. Despite or because of its spare style and strict realism, the story is not just striking but radically disturbing. So last week I picked up the book again, not for the first time in that interim, I should say. I thought I could choose a couple of showpiece passages just by going through my old dog years, but no, the book doesn't work that way. The delivery is so deadpan that climactic moments can often be missed, and it's not till the very end that they all interlock and the total effect blows up in your face. The situation John Livesey, or should it be Livesey? Do you care? All right, I'm going to go with Livesey. A retired and widowed obstetric surgeon goes on an Oregon beach vacation with his son, Elgin, and Elgin's wife and daughter, Katie. Lisa is pregnant with a second child, but nobody seems as happy about that as they should be. John is out target shooting with a new friend. Here is a thing that happens. They began their walk down a trail that ran east from the clearing. Oliver said it led down to a beautiful creek. They walked about a mile and a half, stopping to rest on a ridge above a logging road. Down on the road was a pickup, and a woman in a t-shirt and blue jeans was examining a flat rear tire. She had her spare out and was leaning against the truck with a lug wrench in her hand. Two men on motorcycles passed her, then turned back, stopped. John and Oliver watched. The men were not stopping to help. They attacked immediately. One man ripped the wrench from the woman's hands, while the other looked in the cab of a truck, opened the door, rummaged through the glove compartment. The two old men on the ridge looked on, not knowing quite what to do. The first biker knocked the woman to the ground with a backhanded slap. He stood over her with the iron raised, shouting. John took the rifle from Oliver, reached into his pocket for a shell and loaded. He raised the weapon, took aim, and fell sick. As he stood there, his target sighted, he had the feeling that the man was not a human being, that he had no history, that he was merely a two-dimensional cardboard figure at the end of the barrel. John fired into the air. The Livesey family go to the beach with a few friends. Elgin and a young man named Greg Yunt impulsively decide to try climbing a rock which Elgin has failed to summit a few times before. Here is the thing that happens. The two men splashed through the surf and began their assault on the steep face. Yunt seemed the more confident of the pair as he climbed ahead. Elgin searched for and carefully checked each handhold. Katie and Connie came up the beach and sat on the blanket. They all watched the progress silently. Elgin began to stall halfway up, his movements becoming less certain John stood and took a couple of steps forward. He felt hollow, as if something were about to happen. He wanted Elgin to ease over to the more manageable slope. It appeared Elgin was doing just that when some rock crumbled under Yunt's foot. Yunt fell. Elgin caught him around the legs, and for a fraction of a second, it looked as if he had stopped him, but they both fell. Katie screamed in the chorus of gasps behind John. "Greg," breathed Lisa. John ran to them. The water was just over knee deep. John plowed into the surf, fell, and was up again. Oliver was behind him. They pulled Elgin and Yunt up on the beach. Yunt was holding his arm and moaning. Elgin was not conscious. Katie was crying, and Connie was staring, motionless. John goes to visit Elgin, hospitalized with a few broken bones. From the fall that I just described, actually, Percival just described. In this scene, John, normally taciturn, is a lot more forthcoming than usual, talking about the new friends he's made and a brief affair he's been having with the much younger woman that he rescued from the biker attack. Here's what he has to say. "You know, Newport's not a bad little town. I just spent a little more time in it today. You can get most anything you need downtown." He stood up and looked out at the parking lot. "I think the MG is losing compression." He took a long breath. "Well, my affair interlude with Ruth is over, I think. On the way here, I determined that life was devised by the enemy. Let's allow them to live," he said. "See how they deal with that." Dealing with it, we stumble through the years trying to take care of our own. We do what we have to do. Sacrifices must be made. I'm glad you're not awake to ask me what I'm talking about. I'm a hard man, son. And perhaps I was not the best of fathers. If that's true, I'm sorry. I love you. I loved your mother. I'm not trying to make up for anything. You know, that's not my way. Just realize that I love you, I love Katie, and now I love Lisa. He went to the door, opened it, and paused there. You get some rest now.
I apologize on behalf of the microphone. Make some horrible noises for a second. All right. Over 10 hours. So I'm just going to say I'm a writer too. I'm obviously work at the Writers' Center, but evenings such as this are so energizing for me as a person outside of the Writers' Center, as a writer myself. So thank you all who've read, who've shared work, and it is now my pleasure to welcome Percival Everett to the microphone. Percival Everett, if you don't know, is a celebrated American author, poet, and academic. academic known for his diverse body of work that spans novels, short stories, and poetry. With over 30 books to his name, his most recent novel, James, won the Pulitzer Prize, the National Book Award for Fiction, and the Carnegie Medal for Excellence in Fiction, awarded by the American Library Association. His novels include Erasure, I Am Not Sidney Poitier, and The Trees, which was shortlisted for the Booker Prize and is one of my favorites. Everett is a professor of English at the University of Southern California and has joined us from all the way over there. Percival, please.
Why didn't I know you could do that before? I didn't need to go do readings, I just needed to I sold a lot more books. Those are great readings, thank you, Sam. Thank you. This is a wonderful honor for me. Madison and I have known each other for over 40 years. While he was reading my work, I was bored and able to do the math. And it's been a great friendship. In the interest of stories and telling stories, and some of the best stories I've ever heard from Madison. Well, Madison actually once got rid of one of my migraines by rubbing my temples. I don't know if you remember that. That's probably a little intimate to share with everyone. Have I told the denture story to you? Or?
I have heard the denture story.
Do you mind telling me I've got to tell you a story because I don't know much about the world, but I know cowboys and horses, and that's what I mostly talk about. And it has to do with space and where we live and why I don't write from my own life. The story I'm going to tell you happened maybe 50 years ago, about that. And it was a lesson for me about not taking things from life verbatim and turning them into fiction. I was working in ranches in southern Idaho. And I don't know if any of you have spent a lot of time in southern Idaho, but I became known as the black guy by driving through. In fact, one day I was in eastern Oregon, which is right next to southern Idaho. I was delivering, as they call them, beefs to someone in Baker, Oregon. And I had to find the feedlot, which meant I had to find the man's house in the town of Baker. And I got out of the truck, left the cows, and went to find this address, and I got lost. So I asked this woman on the street, "Can you tell me where this address is?" And she looked at me, and she looked away, and she said, "Yes, it's 3 blocks that way." To which I responded, "It can't be nearly that far." I learned a lot about people in this region. One of them was from one cowboy. He didn't say anything particularly wise or brilliant, but he said something particularly amazing and true, and called me out that way. I worked a ranch. I didn't think I was going to get the job. I might not get to the other stories I'm telling you. I didn't think I was going to get the job because the foreman didn't seem to like me. You know? And a horse was nuzzling my shoulder while I was talking to him. And I was pretty much ready to get in my truck and drive away when the horse bit me. And I did what you're supposed to do when a 100-pound animal does something that it shouldn't do. I turned around and punched him in the nose. And the foreman looked at me and he said, "You're hired." Ranchers are often well-educated people who really don't want to be way out in the middle of southern Idaho on the ranches. But that's where they are. And the foreman told the rancher that, yeah, we had this new guy who studied philosophy. The lonely rancher began inviting me to his house for dinner, where I would go, and we'd have these really pedestrian conversations about Kant. And one night I went back to the bunkhouse where this rangy cowboy was sitting in the room with his feet up on the table, and he looked at me and said one of my favorite things of all time. He looked at me and said, "What did you talk about tonight, Spinoza?" And that was just gorgeous. I don't know what he knew about Spinoza and eminence and all that, but he knew who Spinoza was. And that was just, to me, flat out beautiful. So, the ranch I'm going to tell you about, he did not work on. There was a man with a handlebar mustache, and I'd never seen a handlebar mustache before. He had never seen a black person apparently, because he kept asking me if I had Indian blood in me. And that's what I said, "You got any Indian blood in you?" I'd say, "Well, no." And one day, we were castrating bulls. I know that sounds bad, but it's better than having it be the other way around. There was a man working the squeeze gate, and I was cutting off parts and giving shots. And Handlebar Mustache came up to where we were working, and he said, "Are you sure you ain't got no Indian blood in you?" And I said, "You know, if you weren't so busy studying the ropes, you could see I'm black." Now, I insulted his abilities as a cowboy, and a couple of guys in the fence line laughed. And he walked away, and then the man working the squeeze said, "You got him a good one." I thought, "Oh, great, I can die now." But I went back to the bunkhouse, and this was a Friday, and I was kind of going to Council, Idaho, population -6, and do my laundry and watch a baseball game on television. And ranch work is really boring. I was excited to get out of here. And the cook, a man I had named Carol, came into the bunkhouse and asked if I'd be eating there. Carol had one leg, and he got around really well on those kinds of crutches that have a cuff and handles. And he came in and said, "You got to eat here?" And I said, well, no, Carol, I'm going into town. And he said, "Well, nobody is." And he turned away, and he seemed sad. I used to tell the story and say that Carol was an old guy, and I realized about 10 years ago that Carol would have been my age then. I was telling that story. And now I refer to him as a distinguished gentleman. So Carol said, "No one is." I said, "Well, why don't you come with me? I'm just going to do my laundry and watch a game on TV." I was going to watch, but I didn't like baseball. I was excited. He said, yeah, that sounds good. First he said no, he said yes. And he met me out at my truck. And corduroy sport coat, brand new jeans, leg pinned up, Carol was looking good. And gets into my truck. We're driving into Council, the sun windshield. I lowered my visor, and Carol did not lower his. So I looked over at Carol, realized he was doing something in his lap. I didn't know what. Well, my truck, so I looked. And he had his dentures out. And he was wiping them with a rag. And if you can't say something nice, don't say anything. So I didn't say anything. I've never had dentures. I didn't know what you did with them. And so he was doing that. This is a long story, I'm sorry. We got to Council. We rented a room in the Little Council Hotel, or New Council Hotel, I don't remember what it's called. And up the stairs was our past the desk, straight up the stairs at the top of it. And as we we're going in, there was I don't know what you would call it, a bevy or covey of Belgian tourists. Very confused people, how the hell they had gotten into council. Carol and I put our gear down. We went down the street to a Chinese restaurant, the only restaurant in Council. Then we went down the same street toward the hotel to a tavern where we shot pool. And Carol shot pool with one of his crutches, making a big pretense of chalking up the and it was really good until the beer he was drinking started to take effect. And 3 legs, 2 on one leg. And he started growing steady on that leg. And I said, Carol, maybe it's time to stop drinking beer and sit down. Which Carol took to mean sit down and start drinking whiskey. So Carol was good and drunk by the time Handlebar Mustache came into the bar with another cowboy and a woman who had applied her makeup with a palette knife. and he made a beeline for us, and he said, and I could never do, we were talking about accents, when I say it, it sounds like a lot of words in my mouth, but this is what Handlebar Mustache said. I see you fellows are so ugly, you couldn't find anybody that each other to hang out with. Which I thought was basically true. And I had no argument. Carol, being either more or less inebriated than I knew, looked past him at the 2 people with whom he entered the bar, and he said, I see the same as sure you. Which I didn't really get. But he stood up, and these 2 men started barking at each other, and we were talking about breaking up fights. I don't know how to break up a fight because I stood between 2 grown men wanting to fight 3 legs, notwithstanding, like this. And it soon became apparent that they were only going to bark, but when I looked back at Carol, he turned bright red and passed out.
Oh, God.
I caught him over my shoulder, and I carried him and his crutches to the hotel, past the Belgian tourists, who at least now had something to write on their postcards. They had seen the only black man in a 1,000-mile radius carrying a flat-legged man to his room. So I dumped Carol rather unceremoniously onto his bed, and went and sat by the window and marveled at what a nice time I was having. When I heard gurgling, I'm pretty aware when I gurgled, it wasn't me. There was only one other suspect, and I was Carol. And I walked over, and indeed he was gurgling because his dentures had turned in his mouth. And I became terrified that he was going to swallow them, die, which wouldn't have bothered me a lot. But lead me to explain his body to the Council Police Department of one who had never seen a black man in his life. So, if you work ranches and you touch a lot of things, blood, dung, I have reached into cows and turned calves around, but to reach into another human being's mouth, that is not your kid. To me, that's a big deal, and that's what I did. I grabbed the dentures, I put them on the nightstand, leaped over Carol's bed, you know, those wafers of soap they used to give you in motels. I disappeared one of those, and came back, stretched out on my bed, and I must have fallen asleep because I was startled awake by the sight of his teeth. And I looked at him, and his diaphragm was rising and falling. He was alive, and that was good. I left to do my laundry. I went down to the laundromat about a block away, played with a little Roldon girl while her mother folded clothes on the other end, and a man who was always in the streets of Council, no matter what the weather. Hot, cold, one of those M65 fatigue jackets. A couple of teeth in his head. He came in and he said, looking for quarters, and he made the native woman nervous, and I gave him some quarters. He left. I collected my clothes, and I went back to my room, and when I opened the door and walked in, the curtains had been ripped from the windows, the drapes were on the floor. One match was was askew, the other was on the floor. The blankets were everywhere. Carol's crutches were leaning against the wall, and Carol was hopping around the room. I had been to college by this point. I was able to deduce that something was wrong. And so I said, Carol, is there something wrong? And he told me he couldn't find his teeth. And I said, well, you know, you were choking on him, and so I took him out of your mouth. Here's a man who once drank milk directly from its source on a dare. And it seemed to grow kind of faint when I told him I had reached into his mouth to remove his teeth. He sat on the box spring and he said, well, they ain't, I said, I put him on the nightstand. He said, well, they ain't there now. And I walked over and I looked at the nightstand. I looked under the nightstand. I looked under the beds. I pulled back the carpet. And I said, I put him right here. And then this man had the nerve to look at me and tell me, say the following. You know, preface this by saying, for 12 years of my life, I tried to turn this story into a work of fiction. I couldn't do it. And it's because of what he said next. He looked at me and he said, my grinners, somebody done stole my grinners. In my mind, I was saying, that is fucking beautiful. In 1,000 years, I would never have come up. But I opened my mouth, and what it said was, I'll look outside. And then I stood in the hallway thinking, that was really good. And I said, well, I told him I'd look outside, so I went outside. And I was leaning against the wall, wondering how long someone pretends to look at teeth. When the man from the laundromat came walking up to me, and he said something, and he sounded different. I'd never understood anything he said anyway, but somehow he sounded different. And I said, say something else. And into his hand he spat dentures. And I said, okay, where'd you get those? He said, I bought them off this fella. And I said, how much did you pay? He said, $1. I said, I won't give you $5 for this. And he said, really? And then he said in this cowboy way, well, you don't fit no way. And put him in my hand. I raced into the lobby, into the lavatory downstairs next to the desk, where I put them on this metal sill. There were 3 sinks, 2 stalls, and I could never figure out, even then it hit me, why are there 2 stalls and 3 sinks? But there they were, with one shared mirror, and out of one of the stalls, as I'm maniacally washing my hands, came one of the Belgians. He looked in the mirror at me, and he looked at the teeth on the sill. And he smiled at me, and I smiled at him. Well, they weren't my teeth. And he sprinted out of it. Because the only black man in a 1,000-mile radius was killing people and taking them. I collected the teeth and I mixed the paper towels. And I carried them upstairs to Carol, and I think I said, here are your damn teeth. He said, and he took them and he went to the washroom and rinsed them off, rather cursorily for my taste, and then worked them into his face. Well, he did ask one question before he put them in his face. He said, where were they? And as I tried to make this up as a fiction for years and years, I thought, it's my moral dilemma. Do I tell the truth? Well, I lied. I said they were on the curb, Madison University. And he put him into his face and said that probably the only thing that would have unnerved me. He said, they feel funny. And I thought, they're not his teeth. I don't know anything about dentures, and I thought, a man ought to know his own teeth. I would have my initials. And we never said another word about it. I don't know what happened. I assumed that Handlebar Mustache got into our rooms now. This is his idea of a joke. But we never spoke of it again. But for 12 years, every 6 months, I tried to turn this into a musical. And I could not do it. And this is a story I tell my graduate students. And I couldn't do it for one it didn't leave me any room to do my job. I'm a fiction writer. I created it. I don't report one. And I can tell this, and you laugh, and I hear it, and I'm amused by it myself. You can't believe it actually happened. But I'm not free enough when I try to turn it into a work of art to make it a work of art. So that's why I tell my students, when you're writing fiction and you're taking it from your own life, just remember, not all of us can do that. I can't do that. So I hope. I'm getting my soapbox.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone who came up tonight, everyone who read and shared. Rachel, we have a couple of the board members in the house. Thank you to the Fitzgerald Festival. Again, if this is your first time at the Writers Center, come on back. We have awesome stuff all the time, and I really, really hope I get to see you again. Books are for sale. There's still some refreshments left, and I'm sure our authors will be happy to sign copies of the books. If you get one, maybe we'll set up a table or something to facilitate that, but seek them out as you will. And I guess I'll leave you with this bit of wisdom: watch your teeth. Thank you all so very much, and have a good night.